This is a production of Cornell University.
Thanks, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to be talking today about how best opportunities aren't found. In other words, your career isn't put on a silver platter for you, but rather they're made. So the onus is on you to own your career, and we want to empower you to have the tools so that you can be successful no matter where you end up, whether it's in academia or somewhere beyond. So let's start with a little challenge. Since the 1980s, the cumulative number of faculty positions has remained relatively constant, as you can see in this orange line at the bottom, whereas the number of PhDs awarded has been rising steadily. Yet unemployment for PhDs in the sciences and engineering fields is less than the national average at about 4%. So where does everybody end up? The American Society for Cell Biology brought together several sources to create this infographic for biology PhDs that reveals a faculty job is actually one of the alternative careers. PhDs are successful in industry, in government, in research science-related and non-science jobs. About 30% are estimated to not do a postdoc, and about 30% do a second postdoc for an average nationally of about 4 years. So the numbers don't quite add up because it's really hard to track information reliably on internationals or on all postdocs in general. And these numbers were largely based on the NIH Biomedical Workforce Working Group, which then identified an opportunity to address this. And as a result, they developed the BEST Awards for broadening experiences in scientific training. The goal is to develop innovative approaches that complement traditional research training in the biomedical sciences. So these awards were given to now 17 institutions. They're experimental awards funded by the NIH Common Fund Program Office, which is out of the Office of the Director, Francis Collins. And Cornell is just one of the consortium members that meet monthly via teleconference and several times a year in person to share best practices. So each institution has a different model of how they run their best programs. Some are working with small cohorts of 10 to 20 students a year, and they all go through the exact same programming, and at the end they get a best certificate and they're ready for their job. And at Cornell, we have a very different model where it's kind of a smorgasbord where you'll learn more about what we offer, but it's much more inclusive. Some, like Wayne State, offer programming that includes the humanities and social sciences as well. So Cornell's BEST program is focused on all STEM PhDs and postdocs, thanks to the additional support of the graduate school and the colleges of Ag and Life Sciences, Arts and Sciences, Engineering, Human Ecology, and Veterinary Medicine. We enhance opportunities to help trainees prepare for their future careers. So for alumni, historically, what are those careers, especially for life scientists like you at Cornell? So the good news is they're virtually all employed. So 2 to 5 years after PhD conferral, about 30% are in postdocs, and 2/3 are employed in positions other than postdoctoral training. With that percentage growing to 94% when we survey Cornell PhD alumni 7 to 20 years out from their degree. So when we look at the types of employers overall, other than in a postdoc, about half end up in the education sector, in red here, and 1/3 in the private sector, or this green part of the ring, and about 10% end up in government. When we survey Cornell doctoral alumni, 44%, shown here in the blue graph at the beginning, 7 to 20 years out from their PhD, report to be employed in 4-year colleges and universities or their affiliated research institution. About 1/5 are in industry, but they're employed at nonprofits, foreign educational institutions, the US government, and so on. In green, you see alumni 2 to 5 years post-degree, when we're excluding the postdocs, The greatest shift we see is in employment in the industry sector. But we see an increasing diversity in other forms of employment. Either they're self-employed, they're in foreign governments, they're in medical schools or centers, they might be in K through 12 schools or community colleges. So if we look at the types of employers and we just focus on the education sector up here in red, the great majority are at four-year institutions domestically, and about 17% are in a foreign educational institution. So collectively, they are predominantly in various stages of the tenure track process as assistants, associates, or full professors here in green. For alumni in the government sector, here in gold, if we break it out, we see the great majority, 71%, are at the federal level domestically, and maybe 22% in the non-US government, with 6.5% ending up in the state government. When we look at the industry and nonprofit sector, the majority are in industry and 18% end up at nonprofits. So with this diversity of career outcomes for Cornell alumni, it's really no surprise that current PhDs and postdocs are also interested in learning about all of the possibilities. The BEST program focuses on four main career tracks that fill the gap between the excellent existing support that's here on campus for teaching excellence and academic research training, including careers in science communication. So for instance, if you want to become a journal editor or a science writer or a museum director, for example, in science policy. So this can encompasses both if you want to be in creating policy to regulate science, or on the other side, for scientists who might want to contribute to the policy-making aspect. Also, governance, risk, and compliance, for those who might consider becoming a funding agency program officer, or a head of biosafety, or an intellectual property manager, and industry entrepreneurship and management. Obviously, there's overlap between a lot of these buckets, and this is reflected by the interests of the BEST program participants, which I'll share with you later. So how do you get involved, and why are people interested? Well, they get involved to become a bestie first by going to our website. They fill out a short application about what their career objectives are. We schedule an individual consultation to personalize the program to your individual needs. We invite you to come to events, join the Cornell BEST LinkedIn group. We even hired a photographer to come to take a nice professional headshot if you want to improve your LinkedIn profile somewhat. You can work on an individual development plan, either start one, or if you've already got one, maybe it's a good time to review that. And the key point is to include your professor, your advisors, in the conversations that you're having about your plans, so that that can be accomplished alongside of your research objectives. So the more you know about your own values and where you'd like to explore, the better we can tailor the program to your individual needs. So self-exploration really is key. So from the application, besties express the most interest in industry, entrepreneurship, and management. I mean, it's a big bucket too. So here at the bottom, you see 28% have checked that off. But a large proportion are interested in a combination, often involving science communication. And many just want to learn about all the different tracks to see what career possibilities are geared toward PhDs. So 2/3 of the applicants are actually in the life sciences, with about 1/3 also in the physical sciences. And we have open door programming, so we often have people from the social sciences and humanities join us as well, even though that's not our focus. So they come from over 60 departments across campus and fields. And of our most active trainees compared to campus totals, proportionally fewer are postdocs, probably because if they come to a Research One institution, they probably want to become a tenure track academic professor and are set on their training. And proportionally more self-identify as underrepresented minorities. So our reach, as I said, really extends beyond doctoral students, which are our which are the focus of our program, and postdocs as well. We often have master's students, undergrads, and other people like staff and faculty attend our programming. By college, we have participation across the disciplines with 40% coming from engineering, 30% roughly from CALS, and so on in the different sectors. So some hallmarks, and now that you know a little bit about our participants, we kind of want to tell you what our program actually offers. So we actually begin by reminding everyone that your primary objective is really to have a successful PhD. Concentrate on your research and your publications. We don't want to distract you from that most important job you have here as a doctoral student or a postdoc. However, with that in mind, we don't have any fixed requirements because we know you're busy. And we're ready for you to take advantage of the programming that we have when it's convenient for you. So if you're right before your thesis writing or before your A exam, we don't recommend you participate. We'll catch you up at a different time. So aside from filling out our application, which takes about 10 minutes, you can come to any events by choice, meet with program staff to learn how the program could be customized to your individual needs. So whether you're a first-year grad student or a month away from the end of your postdoc, you can come join in and tangibly benefit from the professional development resources. So some of our participants haven't really thought yet about considering anything beyond academia or unfamiliar with the many options available to them. So at this stage, we provide exposure to the variety of career outcomes to which PhDs are well suited. We share resources for specific information to learn more about the skills needed in a particular career path. And we guide activities that'll help rule in or rule out, because we're really agnostic as to what the career outcome is. We help you rule in or rule out a particular option to help decide whether the pros and cons mesh with your individual objectives. So at this stage, you might want to come to a career panel discussion on science communication or other areas to hear how recent alumni have transitioned from academia and what they like most and least about their jobs, or about how they got there, what their path was. You'll hear their perspectives of firsthand, and we often have experienced managers share what they most value in new PhD hires. So it's a chance for you to broaden your network, not just with alumni, but with like-minded colleagues from across campus in different disciplines. So you might want to go to, for instance, an Advancing Science and Policy club meeting to learn more about what's involved in connecting with policymaking. We've designed special gap-filling courses and workshops to address needs that aren't covered on campus. So, for instance, we have created what started out as a workshop as a business as a second language. It's now a full-blown course called Business and Management Fundamentals. So you can learn more about the business side of science, which might help you in academia as well. So we encourage you to get involved by going to our website, sign up for our listserv, take the time to learn how we can be used as a springboard for other resources that are available to you. Sometimes it's just a matter of learning about where those resources exist, because we don't reinvent programming for teaching or for entrepreneurship for the most part, because those resources are really well developed across campus. So the key point of our program is really that it's more about doing. we want you to apply what you learn and write it on your resume. So we can help design and empower you to create an experience that's customized to your needs and might help others along the way who have similar interests. And we hope that these experiences result in a rule in or rule out, that's okay too, decision, and end up having you actively acquire the skills that will set your resume apart from all the other PhD applicants. So the second level of participation for those who maybe they're post-A exam or they have a little more time, we can help plan and prioritize more experiential opportunities to try on the particular career, learn firsthand whether it suits you, and to learn how to describe your research in a way that will resonate with the future employer. So we hope that each experience results in something you can write on your resume to say, not only am I interested in science communication, but here's the lay article I wrote, or here's the blog I started, or here's the op-ed piece that I contributed to affect policy, or something along those lines. And we want you to be able to say, okay, I've done that, and then use that experience when you're in an interview situation to show that you have drawn from experience rather than theoretical knowledge. So how do we do that? I already mentioned some courses you can take. I mean, there are over 70 courses across Cornell in entrepreneurship alone. One of our besties is actually TAing the technology commercialization course that's coming up. I encourage you, if you're interested in that area, to sign up. But we curate actually probably the 8 or 10 entrepreneurial courses that are open to PhDs and postdocs. They welcome scientists and engineers in their classes to mingle with business students. And so we can save you some time in perusing big, long lists. We have offered certificates in Lean Six Sigma thinking, in biopharmaceutical regulatory affairs, in good clinical practices, and there you have a certificate on your resume that shows not just that you're an expert in FDA regulations, but at least you're taking the active steps to say you want to become more aware of the regulatory path in industry, for instance. So many people have entered business plans, they've participated in the 3-minute thesis competition, they've successfully applied for internal seed grants, either through the Center for Advanced Technology, through statewide clean energy grants, or even through federal programs for small business innovation research. We have 2 company startups already from Besties. We have people invite speakers to symposium like Eric did today. You can be recommended, to be a speaker at an industry conference yourself, or moderate a career panel that the BEST program puts on to give you that leadership experience. Many have gone on to either shape New York legislation to have their policy brief included in the Clean Energy Bill passed by the New York State Senate. And we want you to think creatively and flexibly about internship experiences. So we call them besternships because we want to get out of the mindset of what an internship is that's typically 10 to 12 weeks full-time over the summer for an undergrad. PhDs can really add value over a longer term, maybe perhaps remotely, and using the research skills that you're developing during your thesis work or in your postdoctoral work. So key findings are that we want to be flexible. So for instance, if you want to stay in the lab and don't want to travel off campus, there are many existing opportunities within Cornell, for instance, in the environmental health and safety unit or in the licensing office. We've had besties embedded there where they're on site sometimes, but when they have a lab experiment to go, they go back to the lab and they contribute remotely in their own time, doing market research, doing lab inspections as a biosafety officer, for instance. We have had people arrange with their advisors to work off campus 2 days a week. For instance, at a venture capital investment firm, Excel Partners, to become a venture analyst. So that's kind of an unusual path, but it was personalized for this individual's career goals. We've had ones who worked developing their own technology with a startup firm in Binghamton to implement their research at a food science company. We've had ones who have used the time between their thesis defense and their actual degree conferral to do a real internship, a more classical internship, but for PhDs. And this person happened to be from Luxembourg and is now fully employed at Bain as a consultant. So it was a way not only for the company to check out his experience, but also for him to interview the company to see if that's really where he wanted to end up. We've had students participate longer term with their advisors' consent and approval. For instance, at a strategic analysis firm in Washington, D.C., where this student looked at the regulations and perceptions around gain of function studies that affected the moratorium on pathogenic organism research. And as a result of that work, the moratorium was lifted, and he contributed to that process. Others have actually spent greater amounts of time at a large pharma. This is not usual, but this is to express the range of possibilities that people have successfully done. And this student just completed his PhD and realized that maybe he doesn't want to go to that biopharma company. He's going to be working at another one. So sometimes unexpected outcomes. And, better you do that now while you're doing your PhD, and you might save yourself some time later. So we're trying to start to change the culture. We build on existing seminar series to get a captive audience in the room to spread the word. We encourage students to suggest speakers who come from beyond academia to come and speak within their seminar series. And if that's the case, the BEST program will fund half the cost of the travel. And so it's a nice incentive for departments to be open to that. So I'll share a few example outcomes created by BEST trainees, not to say this is what we do, but to get the creative juices flowing so that you might be inspired for what you might want to do. So for industry, entrepreneurship, and management, the BEST program funded a postdoc to attend a pre-seed workshop, which happened to be happening in Rochester because his technology was ready earlier than the pre-seed workshop that was happening here on campus, to evaluate the commercial potential of his clean tech idea. Now, the pre-seed workshop is a team-oriented, hand-picked team that is made up of a tech transfer officer, a licensing executive, a seasoned entrepreneur, a facilitator, and coach to walk them through the 20 questions they need to ask before investing another 10,000 hours to see if that technology is worth commercializing. And by the way, only one of those questions concerns the technological aspects of it. So it's very important for that idea to go forward to really consider, is anybody going to buy the product? Does it solve any problems? Who are the competitors? How are you going to set up your team? Where are you going to get your funding? And so on. So as a result of BEST referrals and networking at this pre-seed workshop, this postdoc actually assembled a business team to complement his scientific expertise. And together they applied for and were awarded a New York State Energy grant to talk to their first 40 potential customers and get feedback before they even develop their prototype to see whether it would be worthwhile moving forward. They decided yes, it was. And an equally good outcome would have been no, it isn't. And that's also a success in our eyes. And they actually started the company, and they're calling it Ecolectro, and have since won a small business innovation research grant to move forward on this technology. He's now full-time with the company, so that's his path. So key elements of these stories are always that it includes good mentoring, and your advisor might not be your only mentor. Many times faculty are here because they love academia and might not have experience in other fields. So we want to connect you with multiple mentors. There's a little S at the end here in red, from the field of your career aspiration, who might meet with you regularly, encourage you to stay on track, and help you succeed in your career of choice. I should note that we do not assign mentors. That should be a process where you have a good chemistry with someone who gives you advice. And so we don't want to interfere with your process. So in the science policy track, which is spearheaded by Chris Schaefer, who's the principal investigator on this BEST grant. He actually took a sabbatic year to be a science and technology policy fellow himself in Senator Markey's office, and came back with the message that scientists and engineers are by far the worst storytellers ever. And so he developed a course called the Science Policy Boot Camp, from concept to conclusion, which now has had several, it's a team-oriented class that has had several iterations now, where there are tangible projects where teams from different areas of scientific and non-scientific disciplines get together to create an outcome that will address their passion. So for instance, there were a couple of students who thought that it was really important to teach algorithmic thinking early on, not in the first coding class that you get as an undergraduate. And so they developed, with a local elementary school principal, they developed a grant, got outside funding, and deployed this Code for Kids program to 120 second through sixth graders to improve their algorithmic thinking. So they're making a difference locally. Another group, I mentioned the Advancing Science and Policy graduate student organization, has developed a Bring a Politician to Work. And they've already had several sessions where they invited Ithaca Mayor Svante Myrick to come in. They toured various labs. Here he is in a child cognition lab in Maria Casasola's lab, where actually a child was teaching him how to do the experiment. So it was a fun event. He toured several other labs, including an imaging lab and so on, and then had a group discussion with grad students and postdocs who might be interested in seeing how politicians actually get their scientific information to inform their policies. We also had Barbara Lifton come in, and she also did the same kind of thing where she toured several labs. And it's a great way to hear firsthand how you can describe your research to someone who might have last had math in high school, for instance. So it's a different way of thinking about how you describe your work. And these aspects of communication will help you if you're going to teach an undergraduate class or if you're going to mentor another postdoc in your lab. So in the science communication area, we've had an example where Best Trainee was paired with a science communication professional to hone her skills in writing a press release. She learned how to conduct interviews. Sometimes it's really hard to get scientists and engineers to talk cogently about their research in a way that's going to interest the broader public. So she actually worked on the structure and mechanics of writing a piece like that, which is very different from a scientific paper. Learned about the editing process as she sent in her article to the Chronicle, and had several articles published. She helped co-organize with a team of other people ComSciCon, a communicating science conference, which now is in its third year at Cornell, entirely student run. They learn all about event planning and rallying the resources needed and proselytizing about a grand idea that you might want to move your agenda forward. And that's not unlike what faculty do every day when they have new ideas they want to implement. So she's actually in a communication role. She's about to start that role now. So lessons learned are that flexibility and customization is essential, but it's very hard to scale. So that's our problem, but it's a good success. We think, sorry, this should be faculty buy-in. Faculty buy-in is very important, and we want you to have conversations with your advisor. You might just have a perception that they're not receptive to you going into another career. Our programming assessment really helps prune less successful ideas, and we always look at the evaluations to help inform future participants, and we've stopped doing things altogether when we've had bad reviews. So thanks for filling out any surveys that you might have been doing. So again, we emphasize a primary objective is to complete your degree. We do meet with faculty as needed. to address questions, perceptions, and we do discontinue best privileges if we hear that there's been inadequate academic progress. We collaborate very heavily across units because we're a very small office, and so we have connections in the graduate school, career services, alumni affairs. We work closely with the Office of Postdoctoral Studies and various student organizations and professional organizations on and off campus. As I said, we try to identify gaps and coordinate to fill those in. So BEST is not for everyone, and that's fine. And we like to concentrate on sharing the positive messages and not express a doom and gloom attitude of how difficult it is to get one particular career or another. Because frankly, any career you go into, you have to be passionate and you have to be willing to work hard. So that's kind of our message. We have an advisory board that's made up exclusively of grad students and postdocs, and they're really integral in shaping our program and in event planning and outreach to other participants across campus. We're an adaptable program. Our vision and components are flexible, and we have some challenges in evaluation because the NIH is very concerned about time to degree, which might or might not be the right question to ask, because we think that if you spend 2 months, let's say, in an internship and find out that maybe you don't need to do a 3-year postdoc, you will have saved some time long term. So we'd like to engage in those conversations, whether they're politically correct right now or not. We're very inclusive, and we would like to imagine persisting outcomes. We're in now our 4th year of a 5-year grant, so we have 2 more years left. And at the end of that, we're expected to be institutionalized. So the best of our best practices, we hope, will be incorporated. So that's already happening. We have courses that are happening. There's a physics course on science communication that incorporates theatrical and performing arts aspects into how you engage your audience in those first 10 minutes of your talk. We've developed workshops and certificate programs that are continuing. We involve PhDs in programs that prior to the BEST program involvement, they were not eligible for. For instance, internships at small life sciences companies. And we hope to be developing a new paradigm for PhD training, whereas previously it was thought that your faculty member should mentor you throughout your PhD, which would of course lead to a postdoc and probably an academic career, unless you kind of fell by the wayside somewhere else and ended up finding your own way in some other career. So instead, the consortium, which has published this in the FASIP journal just a few years ago, would like to think more about your scientific and research training to incorporate career and professional development throughout the time that you're doing your PhD, such that you can decide whether a postdoc is good for you or not, and to help you be successful in any career that you decide to pursue. So in fact, we have researchers on campus. Mike Roach is in the Dyson School, and he partnered with Henry Sauerman to publish this science paper recently that actually showed that, yes, if you're going into an academic career as a tenure-track professor, you probably will have a postdoc and you'll need it. However, if you're going into an industry career or into an academic non-research position, actually, it might be a financial loss to you if you want to go into that career. And so you should really think about that and think carefully about the skills you want to acquire during your postdoc, such that they will get you better prepared for where you want to end up. So what are the career aspirations of our BEST trainees? Well, we compare when you began your PhD in the light gray here. The majority think they want to become tenure-track faculty. Maybe they haven't even thought about it. They just assumed that was where they wanted to go. However, when we ask them, how about now? We find the biggest shift is in other areas such as consulting, entrepreneurship, and communication careers. So we hope to empower you to own your own career and to be successful wherever you're going to end up. Here's my contact information. I want to thank the Principal investigator of the grant, Avery August. He's a faculty member in immunology and infectious disease in the vet school. The co-PI is John Parker. He's in virology at the Baker Institute. And a co-PI, I mentioned Chris Schaefer. He's a professor in biomedical engineering. I'm Susi Varvayanis, and please contact me if you'd like to have more information. Thank you for your time. I'll entertain questions both from here and from Geneva, if there are any.
That there wasn't a category for PhD students going on to medical school. Does that come up often?
Yeah, so there is tracking of Cornell alumni that go on to further degrees. So we consider that still in training. So if they go to medical school or law school, for instance, or they go on for another master's, let's say in public health after their PhD, we didn't include those statistics in the outcomes, but certainly those we have examples of those.
Could you go back one slide, please?
Just joking. Yes.
Maybe 2 slides. So the people that go into the non-tenure track faculty jobs that don't have a PhD, how do they fare?
So the question is, if you go on to a non-tenure track position that are still in academia, presumably, like where are they, right?
So there's all the other jobs that people have gone into.
Right, so they might be in academic research still, or they might be a core facility director. I mean, we have PhDs here at Cornell who run the genomics facilities, imaging facilities, and so on.
There's PhDs there, but people without PhDs.
So people without PhDs,
How do they fare?
we have not tracked them here because our program is dictated by the NIH to focus on PhD recipients, because many people like me leave with their masters and they have fulfilling careers. But usually master's programs or people who exit with their masters from a PhD program, so that the master's degree programs usually are well served in their career objectives. In fact, on day one, they're told to go to the career fair, for instance. So it's a compressed timeline and it's very job oriented. Those who decide, they started with a PhD program and decided to leave with a master's, that's a different situation. And I have counseled some in that category as well. Some have gone on to successful industry positions. They realized they didn't need a PhD for where they wanted to end up. Some of them end up coming back for a PhD after working for a while because they realize there's a ceiling for master's students or master's degree recipients in the field that they want to go into. Some have ended up in public policy and are working on maternal, fetal nutritional health and so on. So, but I don't have the statistics here. I could look into those.
Do you have a feel for?
Well,
So,
if you look at...
If I were deciding that I probably wanted to go to one of those other jobs, given there's a 50% chance I'll be an academic, should I get a master's or should I get a PhD?
So that's an individual decision. We can't make a blanket statement. It obviously depends on your field and where you want to end up. But as many people see, you will get paid much more. And you might, just as the question about having a postdoc is necessary, is a PhD necessary, is also a question you should have. And we encourage people to make that thought before they enroll into the PhD program. But if you haven't given thought to that, it's an important question. And that's why it's important to talk to people who are in the field that you want to go into. And that's one thing I did. I counseled the person who was leaving with their master's. She's very happily as a process engineer at Pfizer right now. And she chose to leave with her master's degree, but I connected her with people who either did have their PhD or did not have their PhD. And so she could have a comparison of what both the salary level and the advancement levels are for that degree outcome.
So I have sort of 2 questions. So one, and I think you might have mentioned this, but one of the areas that was missing is sort of teaching, but at either a four-year liberal arts college, so not as much research focused, or also at a community college. Is there an area for students that decide they want to go into that? Because I think that even though we are in academia, it's a very different thing doing the research versus having a really strong, concentrated teaching focus.
Absolutely. So the question is on how about teaching focused careers, either if you want to go to a community college or a K through 12 environment, or at a four-year liberal arts college. So actually, our program doesn't cover teaching at all because we have an excellent Center for Teaching Excellence, and we have CU CERTL, which is part of like a 48 institution consortium that provides information about teaching and academic careers. In fact, I brought their brochures today because I think it's very important career outcome to support. And so we work very closely with them. And they have a great academic job search series and mentoring series and how to flip the classroom and use other teaching techniques. Yeah.
And my other question was, I was wondering how the best internships were funded. How do you?
Okay, so the other question is funding for best internships. So that's an ongoing discussion for all our consortium because there are different models. So for large companies, usually they will pay for the person to do an internship. It's a no-brainer. However, there are certain international students due to visa restrictions that can't get paid, in which case that was actually one of the on-campus besternships that we arranged. So they worked in the licensing office, but actually weren't paid, but they got that experience anyway.
Did they pay the tuition during that time, or any fees that they paid for their enrollment? I'm thinking for those students.
So there's almost every possible combination you can think of to address how they address the tuition payments and enrollment situation. So it's done on an individual basis, and it's really hard to make a blanket statement about that. There have been departments on campus that created a course called Internships and Experiential Opportunities. And as long as it's offered to all students, not just international students, it's not seen as a way to get around federal rules. That's been an option that some universities have used. We like to adhere to the Fair Labor Standards Act, which means if you are adding value, you must get paid. And we want to address the perception that grad students and postdocs should not shortchange themselves. They shouldn't undersell themselves. They have a lot of skills. They probably shouldn't volunteer for an unpaid internship unless it's really for their training and the only way they can get their experience under their belt. I think there are ways of showing the value that you're going to add to a company, even a small institution. Now, there are nonprofits which have zero money to be able to pay you, in which case sometimes there are creative ways, I don't want to say to launder money, but to circulate the funds such that we can reimburse the company, let's say, for their training time or for the consulting that the student does. We can pay for travel and accommodations if they go to a place. So maybe they don't get paid per se while there, but there's some mitigation that we can make so that it's more accessible. Some people have taken leaves of absence and others just do it on the side. So it's really a smorgasbord.
Piggyback on the last question. Are those usually like self-organized by the student? They come forward with an idea and you guys work with them to like go through with it, or is it usually prearranged and you kind of like match with internship?
Yeah, we're not. So the question was about whether the besternships are prearranged or whether it's up to the trainee to find that. We have done it both ways. So sometimes a faculty member has one of their students who went off and started a consulting company and they just got an SBIR grant and they're looking for a trainee. That's how that student got that policymaking job. They sent it to me and I send it out and say, hey, who's interested? They apply and then they were accepted for that. Other times it's the trainee, and you know the best fit is going to be one you create yourself, right? Because I don't know what you want. I don't know your career field necessarily. And so the most meaningful interactions will be those that you've found yourself or created yourself. However, to make that easier, we do have a list of all the biopharmaceutical companies that have formal internship sites. So you can click once and get right to their internships and jobs page. So we try and save you some time in doing that so you don't have as big a search. We have a list of all the major think tanks, for instance, or we have a list of all the professional societies that, you know, maybe you want to become more involved in the Phytopathological Society to arrange a student symposium on career development or communication or something. So we try and create those links to make it a little bit easier for you to do your own homework.
Is there a question from Geneva? Here's some. You asked them to the mic.
If Geneva has any questions, like the thing is, I can't hear them, so.
We don't. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right.
I do actually have a question. Sorry, just came up with it.
We can all hear you.
Cool. If we wanted to, would best come up to Geneva to do like presentations or things like that if we had enough students to participate up here? Or on the other end, is there a way to, when you bring in speakers that are presenting down on main campus, like, are they in rooms that are compatible with this system so that we can conference them into us up here?
Okay, to answer your first question, just invite me. And to answer your second question, we would need a student who's enterprising to set up that connection. And so we could, if you have the rooms, then we could create that opportunity. So let's say if we wanted to have a speaker in here, we could do that if somebody's willing to provide the technology to connect you. So yeah, we want to include you.
All right, I'll send you an email.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
Does BEST have or is interested in formal liaisons with individual units of any kind, or is it really emphasized that people come to you with ideas and things like that? Is there any kind of thought about having, you know, embedded people in sections or units or something like that that could facilitate getting people into your orbit, essentially? I'm sure what I'm asking exactly.
So the question, as I understand, is on how the word gets around about the BEST programs. Do we have allies in different units, or how does the word get around? So to be honest, when I took this position, we had a cohort model where I said I could handle about 50 or 60 students. And at our first executive board meeting, we changed our vision and said we need to be open to everybody. So now we have about 350, 60, but we touch over 1,100. So the bandwidth is low for doing active marketing, but that's why I have an advisory board. So our advisory board has members from 10 different fields. Hopefully the word of mouth gets around to those fields. I also have a listserv where anybody could join. I also often email the graduate field assistants and DGSs for each of the fields. Our program started focused in the biomedical fields. However, it's STEM-wide. And so we've done some outreach to faculty department meetings, which is how this kind of set up. We've done road shows to those existing faculty meetings. And we have a website that we hope people will go to. Our target predominantly has been grad students and postdocs. So we advertise in the postdoctoral newsletter, in the graduate school announcements, and other things where grad students and postdocs hang out. But there's still people who never hear about it. And I think that's a challenge at Cornell in general, about how to communicate all the fabulous resources that are at everyone's disposal.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about what happens after, in this stage of institutionalizing the gains that you've made, and whether you would have sort of formal connections to individual units, like SIPs, for example, which is a third of the College of Ag and Life Sciences, that would persist after there's not the current grant and things things like that. That's where I'm going with that sort of thing. And
Yeah, so the question is about institutionalization, how the program will continue beyond the life of our grant. And so I'm working on that end because I'll also be looking at the next opportunity, right? Because that's what I do 100% of my time. So we write support letters for grants where perhaps a portion of the training would be done through the BEST program and then supported on the grant. We have a proposal into the graduate school who's working with the provost and chief financial officer to see what can be done there. But those are ongoing discussions. Now, other consortium members have different models for that as well. Many of them have like a give button right on their BEST site where alumni can donate to their program. Or they work with an industry organization to hopefully have, New Jersey Bio fund internships for graduate students and postdocs. So everybody has a kind of a different model. Wayne State, the PI happens to be the dean, so she just takes it out of her dean pocket and gives it to the BEST program. So, there are different models that are working, and I think it might be a combination of all those. And it might be that we concentrate our efforts and reduce our offerings to the areas where we're making the most difference, which is why our evaluations are so important.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. If you have more questions, absolutely come out and talk to Susie or send her an email. And let's thank Susie one more time.
Thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.